fourth day. The first decapitation. There is an up higher than up, but at the very top, down is all there is. It was a dreadful sight. If I were to compare it to something, let's see, Grubber Norbert's painting, The River. The same sort of creepy marble-coloured river ran through the middle of Kanami's Altier, dividing it in half. Seemingly due to the previous night's earthquake, cans of paint lay scattered around the room, and the simple iron pole shelf had fallen over as well. The earthquake had caused the shelf to tip, spilling cans everywhere, their contents dumped on the floor, and this river was the result. It was a feasible theory, and that's no doubt how it happened. But while this river was a bizarre enough spectacle on its own, the real issue lay in the opposite of the riverbank. It was beyond imagination, or speculation, and couldn't be written off as the earthquake's doing. An earthquake capable of this wouldn't be found on Earth. The face-down body of a person lay on the floor, with a noticeable vacancy from the neck up. A headless corpse. A beheaded corpse. It didn't matter what words you chose to describe it. It was what it was. The body was missing a head, was wearing the same dress as Kanami-san had been wearing the previous day. That exquisite-looking dress that Kanami-san had boasted would never get dirty while she was painting, was now stained red-black with blood. It didn't look wearable anymore. What's more, there was no longer anyone to wear it. Or, let's be more specific, the wearer was no longer alive. This is grotesque, I uttered reflexively. It went without saying, but the words just came out. The room smelled like paint thinner. Next to Kanami-san's fallen body sat an overturned wheelchair and a single canvas. It was far away, so I wasn't sure, but the painting appeared to be my portrait. It was beautiful, a masterwork. Even from this distance, separated by the river, I could tell. I felt a shock with my body, not with my mind. In some ways, it was more disturbing than the sight of the headless body. I recalled what Kanami-san had said to me the previous day. It's not art if you get to pick who looks at it. Point taken. With this picture, I had no complaints. Without a doubt, Ibuki Kanami was a genius, to the point that it made me tremble. And this made her death all the more devastating. It had been a long time since I'd felt devastated by anything, but I was truly devastated by this. By the death of Kanami-san. The death of Ibuki Kanami. Why? Yes, Ibuki Kanami was dead. I mean, who could stay alive after their head's been chopped off? Even Rasputin couldn't survive a decapitation. And Kanami-san was just a physically normal human being. Well, we shouldn't just leave her like this, I said, breaking everyone's silence. I looked over at Kunagisa. Her lower lip stuck out dubiously, as if she'd noticed something strange about Kanami-san's body. She appeared skeptical about something, but now probably wasn't the time to be thinking about such things. If I had to give a reason for each and every one of Kunagisa's actions, I would surely die. As I tried to take a step forward, she tugged at my arm. Ichan, wait a sec. Huh? Why? The paint isn't dry yet. Oh yeah. Crouching down and checking with the tip of my finger, I found that she was right. My middle finger turned marble-coloured. But now isn't the time to worry about things like that. There was a cut-up dead body right in front of us. To worry about dirtying your shoes at a time like this was beyond trivial. Hey, I said wait, she said. Then, before I knew what she was getting at, she took off that black coat of hers and tossed it right in the middle of the river of paint. It was like a stepping stone in a river. Wasn't that your precious coat? Its time had come. I tried to say something about just tossing her memories off like they were nothing. But as she had said, there was a bigger issue at hand right now. Besides, what's done is done. With little recourse, I jumped on the coat and then to the other side of the river. I groaned. It had been quite a while since I had last seen a headless body. I removed my sweatshirt and placed it over Kanami-san's upper body. I looked back towards the door where everyone was standing and slowly shook my head. There was no point in using words. Everyone, Iria finally said, could I have us all gather in the dining room? I think we need to discuss what we'll do from here on out. With that, she made her way to the hall. The four maids, Rei-san, Akari-san, Hikari-san, and Teriko-san, quickly followed close behind. Finally, the other guests began filing out of the Altier, 2 by 2 and 3 by 3. The last ones to remain in the room were Kunagisa, me, and Shinya-san. He was staring at Kanami's body, his face pale and blank. Shinya-san, stepping back on my coat, I returned to the other side. Let's go. There's nothing we can do here. It killed me to say it. Oh, yeah, right. His mind was off in a very different place. Despite his response, he made no attempt to move. He stood completely rigid, his mind unable to comprehend, refusing to comprehend the sight before his eyes. I understood how he felt. If the same thing had happened to Kunigisa, I probably would have been the same way. No, that's not right. I probably would have broken down and gone on a screaming rampage. I know that's hard to imagine for a guy like me, who, as Maki-san would say, was dead to all emotions, but that's probably what would have happened. In that respect, Shinya-san was truly admirable. He didn't look too good, but at least he hadn't broken down, and he could even speak. His mental facilities remained intact, albeit just barely. This was what separated him from me. I was just a kid. Shinya-san was an adult. I didn't know what kind of relationship Shinya-san and Kanami-san had, whether he was just a caretaker, or something more, or perhaps something less. However, remembering the sad look in his eyes the previous night, and seeing him now, I somehow understood. "Ii-chan, let's go ahead," Kunigisa said, pulling on my arm. Yeah. And thus ended our tranquil lives on the island, and thus began the next chapter. The morning of the 4th day on the island had started extremely normally. Really extremely normally. I woke the same as always. By the time I got to Kunigisa's room, she was already awake and sitting at her computers. She said she was checking her email. "Do my hair," she said, without so much as a good morning. I put the hair on top of her head in 2 tails. What we call a twin tail. I figured it would be easy enough for her to undo it herself this time. "I feel I like breakfast today," she said, so we headed to the dining room. Peeking into the living room on the way, I found that Maki-san and Shinya-san were still there drinking wine. They must have been up all night drinking. They sure aren't paying their age any mind, I thought, but of course I stayed quiet. Out of courtesy, I invited them to breakfast, and they accepted. The 4 of us entered the dining room. Sitting at the table was Akane-san, and, making a rare appearance, Irie-san. "Oh, what an unusual occurrence," Irie-san also said, "to have everyone gathered like this, even in the morning." "Well, I suppose it was inevitable. Shall I call the others? It'd be nice to have breakfast together." She summoned the nearby Akari-san and asked her to go fetch Yuyoi-san, who was no doubt in the kitchen, and the other maids. "Well, I'll go fetch Kanami-san," Shinya-san said. "She's probably all done painting by now. I wonder if she's still sleeping. Yeah, she doesn't get cranky in the morning, despite her lousy personality." He chuckled a bit at his own joke and looked at me. "Hope you're looking forward to seeing that picture," he said, and left the dining room. It would have been the first time that Kunigisa and I had done breakfast with the entire group, but it never actually happened. When Shinya-san returned to the dining hall, what he brought was the news of Kanami-san's death. Kanami's been murdered. That's how he phrased it anyway, but it was quite a bit of an understatement. If you ask me, there was no way she died of sickness, or an accident, or even suicide. She had been beheaded. Whatever the case, this was a murder, and not just a murder. Me? Right. After dinner, I was with Kunigisa the whole time. I took a bath in her room, and then she said she was hungry, so we went to the living room. On the way, we ran into Akari-san. Isn't that right? Right. In the living room, we met Hikari-san and Maki-san and Shinya-san, and then the earthquake. There was an earthquake, right? We were in the living room until the earthquake occurred. After that, I took Kunigisa back to her room, and then... Right, I went to sleep. I woke up today at 6, and I've been with Kunigisa ever since. I tried my best to sound calm, even under everyone's gaze. An alibi check. Why we had to start with me, I don't know, but Irie-san had requested it, so there was no choice. It seemed that she viewed me as the prime suspect. The dining room. Eating my slightly cold breakfast. No one else seemed to be able to continue with breakfast after seeing the headless corpse. And indeed, I was feeling pretty squeamish myself, but Yuyoi-san's cooking was so good, I couldn't just let it all go to waste. The round table. Irie-san, Teriko-san, Rei-san, Yuyoi-san, Shinya-san, Kunigisa Tomo, and myself. Akane-san, Maki-san, Hikari-san, and Akari-san. Everyone was sitting at their assigned seats, with only Kanami-san's seat, at the 5 o'clock position, empty. It would never be filled. Irie-san tilted her head at me a bit in response to my testimony. Then she glanced over at Hikari-san at the 10 o'clock seat. "Hikari, is that true?" "Yes," she nodded. "Up until the earthquake occurred, 1 o'clock was it? Yes, 1 o'clock. The 5 of us, including me, were talking the whole time. I can vouch for that." "Did anyone get up and leave for a while?" No, Hikari said with a bit of uncertainty. I don't think so, although I couldn't say for certain. No one left, Kunigisa said, coming to her rescue. And I've got the perfect memory. Nobody left the living room. Is that so? Iria closed her eyes. In that case, you and Kunigisa, Sakaki-san, Himene-san, and Hikari can all account for one another, up until the earthquake. Is that right? How about after the earthquake? I slept alone, so I suppose I don't have an alibi. Thank you. Well then, I suppose we should go ahead and give my alibi next. Last night I was with Rei and Sashirono-san in my room talking. Yesterday's dinner was even more delicious than usual, so I was asking her about the recipe. Isn't that right, Sashirono-san? Possibly because her name suddenly comes up. Yuyoi-san looked pretty startled. Yes, she nodded quickly. Rei-san shrugged a bit, but said nothing. If you thought about it, she must have been a really cool-headed person. Of course, Teriko-san was quiet as ever, but Rei-san was more silent than you would have imagined. Whether she was just being loyal to her employer, or this was just her natural personality, I wasn't sure. The earthquake had happened, and then I decided to go back to my room, she said, as if struggling to remember. That's right, Iria-san nodded. After that, Rei and I were up all night talking. Kunigisa-san will be leaving soon, so I thought we should discuss the idea of holding some kind of fun event. You know, like a farewell party. That's the tradition here anyway. We ended up foregoing sleep, so I just came straight here for breakfast. In other words, Iria-san and Rei-san had perfect alibis. Yuyoi-san, like Kunigisa and I, only had an alibi up until the earthquake. Shinya-san and I had complete alibis as well, Maki-san said. Kunigisa-chan and the rest can confirm that up until the earthquake. And Shinya-san and I can vouch for each other after that. My, alcohol's just wonderful. How trustworthy was a drunk person's testimony? Maki-san must have known I was thinking that, because she glared at me. But without a word, she turned to Shinya-san. Isn't that right? She asked. Oh, yeah, right, he replied vacantly. Hikari, what did you do after the earthquake? I went back to our room. Akari and Teriko were there too. After that, I went to bed. I woke up today at 5 o'clock, then got back to, what about you, Akari, and Teriko then? Akari, answer. After dinner, we didn't have work left to do, so... She paused, with a hand to her cheek. She tried to think. Teriko and I were together in our room, the whole time. Then the earthquake happened, and Hikari came back soon after. That's when we decided to go to bed. The three of you share one room? I asked. Akari-san's eyes shot in my direction, as if she never would have guessed that I would speak up. Yes, the three of us share a room. Is something wrong with that? Oh no, nothing. Just wondering. I bowed to her. I wanted to ask if they shared the same futon as well, but I decided to stay quiet. That meant that Akari-san and Teriko-san had solid alibis up until the earthquake as well. After that, they had all gone to bed, so they couldn't really vouch for each other. Teriko-san nodded a bit after listening to Akari's testimony, but ultimately said nothing. It was a simple gesture, but somehow hard to understand. This is becoming quite complicated. Iria-san looked toward the last possible suspect, Soniyama Akane-san. What about you? She said. What were you doing last night? Akane-san, who had been closely observing the situation up until now, with arms folded and mouth shut, let out a sigh. Judging from the fact that nobody's mentioned my name up until now, it's probably pretty obvious, but yep, I wasn't with anyone last night, she spoke unhesitantly. After I finished dinner, I went back to my room and got on the computer. I was working on some modelling, and, well, I'll spare you the boring details. There should be a log, so you can check that for proof, but I suppose that kind of thing can be forged. I guess you couldn't call it an alibi. I don't know much about computers. What do you think, Kunigisa-chan? Kunigisa's head popped up. Hell of a time to be daydreaming. Oh, with a degree of skill, a person could easily manipulate something as simple as a log. Akane-chan, how much do you know about computers? Akane smirked. There's probably no point in answering that. Oh, okay. Kunigisa nodded. Yeah, I guess you're right. With the right tools, even an amateur could alter a log. It's not like it's very hard. You can find that kind of software all over the place. Isn't there a way to see if the log's been altered? I asked. There is, but that can be fake too. Just about anything's possible with a computer, you see. So it's hard to use one to confirm an alibi. Kunigisa Tomo, invited to this island as leader of that team. She was peerless in her field, so there was no way that she was wrong. In which case, Akane-san had no alibi to speak of. Akane-san let out another sigh. But I suppose I have to make a defense for myself, or else you'll have me on a cross. So I'll just go ahead and say it. I didn't do it. Certainly I hate artists, but I don't think they're worth killing. They're already dead when they're alive. It wouldn't be worth the effort. I had nothing to do. She probably meant to say I had nothing to do with it. But at any rate, she didn't seem to be bluffing or playing tough. And it didn't seem like an act either. Okay, everyone please hold on a minute. I need to work this out in my head. Before that, please hold on, I said to Irie-san, the conversation growing bizarre. Hold on before we hold on? Irie-san, what exactly are you trying to do? I'm sorry? It just feels very strange to me. And, of course, this is your island and your mansion, so I know it's probably better not to say anything. Plus, I'm not even really a guest, but I'm guessing anyway. What exactly are you trying to do? Well, I'm trying to get the bottom of this, of course, she smiled softly. It seems pretty clear to me, she continued. Ibuki-san was murdered by someone, and in this case, that means that she was murdered by someone in this room. As you said, this is my island, and my mansion. One of the guests I invited here has been killed, and the murderer is right here. Surely you don't think we can just leave this alone? She glanced over the crowd with an ironic smile. Indeed, she was right. This was a remote island, a remote, deserted island, completely isolated. Wet Crow's Feather Island. If there were 12 people on this island and one was killed, the murderer had to be one of the remaining 11. Even elementary school students can do that sort of basic arithmetic. Gosh, another death, Irie-san said with a sigh. Another? Did she just say another? And another decapitation at that? Could it be that this island's cursed? Say, Himine-san, can you see into that? You're the one who's cursed, Maki-san answered. The island is just an island. If anything is cursed, it's you. A disheartened statement as that was, Irie-san replied with a strange smile. Maybe so. It all made sense. It had seemed strange that despite her aptitude, Maki-san was able to get along with everyone other than me. But now I get it. Nobody else on this island cared about what other people said. But this is a fairly simple case. Maybe there's no need for all this questioning after all. The time of the incident is fairly laid out for us. Is it? It is. You saw it too, right? All the paint got knocked over during the earthquake, and Ibuki's body was lying on the other side. How wide do you suppose that river of paint was? Nobody ventured an answer, so I went ahead. At a quick glance, I would have said about 10 feet. Right. Not that big, but certainly not small enough that you could jump over. So we can confirm that the murder must have happened before the earthquake. The shelf had fallen over in the quake, resulting in that marble-coloured river. What did that mean? The quake must have been more intense than I had realised. But that's not all. What did the river really mean? Hold on a second, Akane interrupted. She looked a bit concerned. This conversation doesn't bode well for me. You know why? Why? Everyone besides Akane-san had an alibi prior to the earthquake. I was with Kunigisa the whole time. Same with Hikari-san, Maki-san, and Shinya-san. Same deal with Hikari-san and Teruka-san. And of course, Irie-san and Rei-san and Yuyoi-san. Everyone had an alibi that can vouch for one another. Irie-san was right. There was no way someone could jump over that marble river of paint the earthquake had created. Likewise, there was no way to cross the river without stepping in the paint and creating footprints. In which case, the murder had to have happened before the earthquake. The only one with no alibi at this time was Akane-san. Indeed, this didn't bode well for her at all. Irie-san, she clucked. I'm just going to have to ask you straight. Do you think I did it? That certainly was straight. Yes, Irie-san admitted, just as directly. I mean, who else could have? Akane-san broke eye contact with Irie-san and said nothing. She was at a loss for an effective argument, despite that seven fool's brain of hers. Feeling some silver of connection with her somehow, I wanted to jump in and save her, but if a member of the seven fools couldn't think of a rebuttal, there was no way that a programmed dropout could. An awkwardness hung in the air for a while, but it was Kunigisa who broke it. That's wrong, she said. I don't think that logic makes complete sense, Irie-chan. Oh, why's that? Irie-san seemed strangely glad to hear it. Ah, I see. You're talking about the possibility of an accomplice. I suppose there is that possibility. That would make everyone's alibis a little shaky. No, not that. Even if you don't consider an accomplice, you're missing something. Right, Ii-chan? Huh? I blurted out, completely surprised that I would be pulled into this. Come on, Ii-chan. Tell her. About what happened last night. Last night? Something happened? Looking fairly irritated, Kunigisa clammed up. This was a fairly rare thing for her. What can I say? Unlike you, I have bad memory. Geez, you really don't remember? Your memory isn't bad. It's non-existent. Do you always forget things this important? After the earthquake, Shinya-san made a call to Kanami-chan, right? Oh! Hikari-san and Shinya-san looked up in surprise. That's right. Shinya-san had called Kanami-san after the quake and confirmed that she was okay. confirmed that nothing had happened to her. Wow, that was important. Just like Kunigisa said. What did that mean, though? What would happen now? In other words, Kanami-chan must have been killed after the earthquake. Hold on a second, Irie-san said with a bit of panic. But the River of Pain? Well, Irie-chan, that must mean this. She paused for a moment. The outer layer was locked. Everyone exchanged glances for a moment. The River of Pain was unjumpable for sure, and it was 10 feet wide. Maybe it was possible if you were a long jumper. But even then, there was no space to get a running start. If you considered that, the murder must have happened before the earthquake. Just like Irie-san said. But then Shinya-san's story wouldn't have made any sense. Immediately after the earthquake, Kanami-san had neither been killed nor harmed. Sakaki-san, Irie-san said. That was Ibuki-san's voice for sure, right? He went even paler, with a confused expression written on his face. At last, he nodded. Yeah, it was definitely Kanami. No mistake. She said she was busy and the paint had fallen over and everything was a mess. She had to have been alive after the earthquake. I heard Sakaki-san talking on the phone as well, Hikari-san told her mistress. He asked me if he could use the house phone, and I think Ibuki must have been alive still. Yeah, she was still. He clutched his head in anguish. If I had only gone into the altar lair instead of neglecting my duties. Damn it! I'm scum. I'm nothing but scum. There wasn't much to say to that. Only that in the end, it wasn't the earthquakes or blizzards or fire that was frightening. It seems there's some kind of solace to be found in regret. It serves an escape from what's right before your eyes. You end up pinning all your bad deeds on former you. It's hardly what you'd call self-condemnation. When you're regretting something, you're technically being good. I'm not saying Shinya-san was a monster. People are just weird that way. If anyone was a monster, it was me, for only being able to nitpick at people's flaws like this. This is starting to get strange, Akane-san said, stroking her chin. According to Shinya-san, Hikari-san and Kunigisa-san's testimony, the murder must have happened before the earthquake. But after the earthquake, the River of Pain had already been formed, in which case, there's nobody who could have killed her. In which case, that's right, Akane-chan, Kunigisa interrupted. She has that look she gets when she started finding something interesting. This is an incredibly strange situation. When you say the altar layer was locked, you mean, Irie-san nodded, seemingly convinced. Indeed, even now the paint isn't dry, huh? Could there have been a way to climb over it and enter the room? Say, Akari, where's the house phone in Ibuki-san's altar lair? It's beside the window, on the phone stand. Akari-san answered with great certainty. Irie-san crossed her arms and considered this. Kunigisa-san, you posed this question, but I don't suppose you know the answer already. Do you know who did it? Nope. Kunigisa answered, strangely confident. Of course, I didn't know either. Nobody knew. What about the window? Is it possible that a person entered through the window? Shinya-san asked. Hikari-san answered. But it's the second floor. I don't think it's possible. And I'm pretty sure that window's locked from the inside, so it can't be open from the outside at all. Probably, Hikari-san answered. Check. So the window was impossible, and so was the door. It couldn't have happened before the earthquake, or after the earthquake. So... Okay. We were at a complete dead end. Everyone fell into silence once more. And then, eyes started shifting back towards Akane-san. Huh? She seemed a little surprised. Hey, I thought I had cleared myself. Maybe not, Irie-san said. Clearing that paint of river is impossible, right? So ultimately, it must have been done before the earthquake. What about what Shinya-san said? He could have been tricked. Maybe it was an auditory hallucination or something. Auditory hallucination? Nonsense. It was beyond nonsense. I had to say something. I think that's just what you want to believe, I said. I don't think so, Irie-san said, unfazed by my opinion. Even supposing it wasn't an auditory hallucination, it could easily have been some other sort of misunderstanding. There's no crossing that river of pain, that much is for sure. Thus, it's only logical to presume that the murder happened before the earthquake, in which case, it can't be anyone but Akane-san. This isn't good, Akane-san said, seemingly truly worried. I know this probably won't help my case any, but I can't help but feel that Akari-san and Terika-san's alibi is a little sketchy. I mean, family members vouching for each other? It wouldn't hold up in a court of law. We're not talking about the court of law, Irie-san said flatly. I didn't think so, Akane-san said, as if she expected such a response. Still, determining the criminal by process of elimination doesn't make much sense. It's silly, and simply ignoring Sakaki-san's testimony isn't exactly what I'd call logical thinking. It's selective thinking. Selective thinking? Akane-san shot me a look as if to say, will you explain? A confirmation bias, I blurted. Suddenly remembering from my program training that one is never revealed his own stupidity to a senior. In other words, it means when you can only consider testimonies and evidence that suit your opinion and write off all evidence as contrary, as some kind of fluke. Actually, they say that in supernatural ability experiments. My eyes wandered over to Maki-san. They use it a lot. Dry love, wasn't it? They obsess over evidence and suggest these abilities exist, while ignoring any evidence that suggests they don't. It's their way of getting desirable results, I guess. I don't really follow you. I'd gone to all that effort to remember these things, and here Irie-san wasn't even listening. What a waste of breath. Akane-san sighed deep. I suppose Ibuki-san and I were on pretty awful terms, but still. I recalled their nasty bickering from the previous night's dinner. It didn't exactly do wonders for her case. Certainly it wasn't Akane-san's lack of alibi that made Irie-san doubt her so much, but this as well. Of course, it wasn't that I didn't understand Irie-san's feelings, but if you took Shinya-san's testimony into account, even Akane-san couldn't be a suspect. It was an uncommittable crime. There were no suspects. There was one victim and 0 suspects. The situation didn't make any sense, and thus, to fix it. Sakaki-san's testimony seems shady after all, Irie-san said, staring right at him. Even if it's not a lie, it's got to be some kind of misperception, or dream, or some such. But I heard him talking on the phone, Hikari-san said. Irie-san shook her head. It's not like you heard Ibuki-san's voice, right? Sakaki-san is the only one who heard the voice directly, which means... Come on, that's... Shinya-san started to protest, but as if realizing he had no basis for an argument, he went silent. Well, if that's the way it is, I guess there's no choice but to suspect me. That's one way to look at things anyway, Akane-san said, almost as if she was talking about someone else. Even now, she didn't seem to be lying or acting. Soniyama Akane, ER3 system, 7 fools. She seemed all too used to this pandemonium. But still, you don't have any proof. Irie-san, even if you are the mistress of this island, and this mansion, you wouldn't treat me like a criminal without proof, would you? This may not be a court of law here, as you say, but it's not some dusty old detective novel either, right? You can't just assume that I'm a criminal based on this unformulated process of elimination and selective thinking. Nobody can do that. But Soniyama-san, you also can't prove that you're not a criminal. You can't ask the innocent to prove their innocence. You can't prove the improvable. I'm innocent until proven guilty. You're talking law again. Akane-san's shoulders slumped. Well, what's your point, Irie-san? So I'm a prime suspect. Fine. That's absolutely right. I'm the only one with no alibi before the earthquake. Nobody could have entered the autolet after the earthquake. Sure, I'm with you on that. Therefore, Sakaki-san's testimony becomes suspicious. Makes sense. So what now? What should we do? Irie-san looked around the table with a troubled expression. It seemed that she hadn't thought any further than this. Anticlimactic. Throw me to police or whatever you want, Akane-san said, brushing the bangs from her face. Akane-san of the 7 Fools being sent off to the police? I hate the police, Irie-san said, still perplexed as she stared at the ceiling. Oh, what to do? The heaviness filled the air once again. I whispered to Kunigisa. Hey, Tomo. What's up, Ichan? Isn't there some way to stop this witch hunt? There is. Yeah? Yeah, but... She looked up at me. You ought to do it, not me. Yeah, okay. I nodded, then raised my head. Irie-san called to me with a confused look. Yes, you. Ah, good. It was nice not to be ignored. I have a suggestion. Yes? How about using the room I've been staying in? It looks like you can only lock and unlock it from the outside. What if we kept Akane-san there for a while? Kept her there? She eyed me dubiously. You mean like imprisonment? Not imprisonment exactly. Not imprisonment, just a brief period of seclusion. Irie-san, I think the biggest thing we have to fear right now is that this turns into a string of murders. Kanami-san was killed. Okay, that's already said and done. I hate to be so frank about it, but what's done is done. But more important, we can't let anyone else die. The quickest way to deal with a situation like this is to isolate the prime suspect. If Akane-san really is the murderer, naturally she won't be able to commit any more murders. If, on the other hand, someone else used some kind of trick and managed to sneak in and kill Kanami-san after the earthquake, that person would have been brought to a standstill. After all, if they tried anything again, it would prove Akane-san's innocence. I looked around to see people's response. In other words, create an anti-agnostic environment so that the killer can't move around. This includes Akane-san as well as everyone else. The autolair may have been locked, but locked doors are made to be unlocked. There may have been some kind of trick. There might not have been. That doesn't matter. What matters is we don't know either way. Akane-san might have done it. Someone else might have. Even I might have. I might not. So I think the best thing to do is to create a situation where the killer can't do anything. Ah, I get it, Nisioisin said, a bit to my surprise. That makes a lot of sense. I'd have to say I agree. I don't think there's a very solid basis for suspecting Soniyama-san. Alone, Irie-san's reasoning seems rather arbitrary. Irie-san gave a quizzical look. Nonetheless, Nisioisin continued. I don't think it's a bad idea, but you don't intend to just lock her up forever, right? In that awful room. Hey, I've been sleeping in that awful room, damn it. Lousy bourgeoisie. Well, just until the police arrive. This is a private island. It shouldn't take more than 1 day or 2 to get an investigator out here. I'm not calling the police, Irie-san said, completely surprising me. Pardon me, madame? What was the horrible thing you uttered? I mean, what's the point, right? Even if we call the police, they'll just figure Soniyama-san was the criminal and it'll end there. The police won't do anything. It wasn't Irie-san's word that I found suspicious, but a facial expression. The police won't do anything? Why did she say that with such a stern face? But we can't just not call the police. If we did that, there won't be any point in confining her. Not necessarily. We just have to piece things together while she's in there. We'll track down the real culprit with evidence and reason. Doesn't that make sense to you? Will you be the one investigating then, Irie-san? Something about Irie-san's ideas of using reason didn't sit well with me at all. But to my surprise, she shook her head. No, not me. Of course. Don't you remember? I told you yesterday, didn't I? In a week, no, 6 days, that wonderful, marvellous human being is coming to this island. The detective of this proverbial mystery novel. Irie-san's favourite. Irie-san's hero. Surely Aikawa will crush this problem to smithereens. To smithereens. What an expression. And she didn't look like she was exaggerating either. 6 more days, huh? Akane-san said, cynically, letting her crossed arms drop down beside her. Well, whatever. Fine. I know I'm not guilty, but if this is what it takes to convince you, what can I say? I presume we can trust this Aikawa-san. Yes, of course. Irie-san gave a confident nod. You could feel her utmost faith in this hero of hers, just from looking at her. Akane-san let out one more big sigh. Fine. Let's do it then. I wonder if that was really the right thing to do, I said, as I played with Kunagisa's hair. She said it was too heavy or tied up high like that, and she wanted me to redo it. Here I had thought it was adorable, but if she didn't like it, I had no choice. Everybody had since split up, and the 2 of us have gone back to Kunagisa's room. I think it's okay. It's pretty much what I expected to happen. Akane-chan must be kinda grateful too, eh? It's a way better idea than continuing that unproductive bickering anyway. I wonder. As the one who suggested the idea in the first place, I couldn't imagine Akane-san was too happy about it. I felt a little guilty. It might well have been the only solution, but I couldn't help but wonder if there was some other way. All done. Thank you. She crawled over to her computer rack and sat down with her back to me. Then she switched on the power and started typing. I feel like we've wronged Akane-san. Maybe so, but some things can't be avoided, you know, Ichan? After breakfast, Akane-san had gone off to my room on her own 2 feet. It had been decided that Akari-san and the others would deliver meals to her directly, and that she would have to call them from the room phone every time that she wanted to use the bathroom. Akane-san had requested a reading lamp, so that she could pass the following 6 days reading books that she had brought. 6 days. The room wasn't a particularly bad environment, but the door couldn't be unlocked from the inside, and the window was way high up. There was virtually no means of escape. In that sense, it really was imprisonment. 6 days. It really was too long to be locked up. If only Irie-san would call the police, we wouldn't have to do all this. It's like she's trying to cover up an incident altogether. But Irie-chan is right, you know. If she had called the police, they would have blamed Akane-chan and closed the case right there. Or even if they didn't convict her, she would have been a suspect. I mean, wouldn't you want to avoid something like that? Seriously. One of the 7 fools becoming a murder suspect? Do you know a lot about the ER3, Tomo? I've got a few acquaintances from over there, but I'm sure that you know more than I do. Speaking of the 7 fools, Akane-san didn't have criminal immunity or anything, did she? But it would be a worse situation for me, not to mention Yoi-san, and Maki-chan, who are both well respected. Nobody needs a scandal like this to deal with. Of course, the same goes for Irie-chan, so it's only natural that she isn't calling the police. Natural, huh? It was probably this island itself that was unnatural, but judging from Irie-san's manner, I got the feeling that there was more to the story, like she had some more fundamental reason for not wanting to call the cops. Do you suppose that Irie-san had some specific reason for disliking the police? Well, what if we asked her? I doubt she'd tell us. Yeah, maybe. Anyway, once this Aikawa character Irie-chan's so crazy about gets here, everything will be solved. It's just another 6 days. Yeah, but Irie-san was the mistress of the island, and if she said no police, there was no going against her. For what it was worth, there'd probably be no more murders with Akane-san locked in seclusion. But still. Say, Tomo. What? Ii-chan? I want to ask a favour. I accept. What is it? Could you do something about that locked door? I don't know, but for you I'll try. There was no need to spend the next 6 days just sitting around. I was the one who had proposed the course of action in the first place, so I had a duty to give the case some serious thought. If we can figure this case out quickly, we won't have to keep Akane-chan locked up there, whether she did it or not. She swiveled her chair round to face me. She beckoned me closer. Here, here. I walked over the computer. For the time being, I've typed up everyone's alibis. Ibuki Kanami, murdered. Soniyama Akane, before the earthquake, X. After the earthquake, X. Kunigisa Tomo, before the earthquake, naught. Ii-chan, Hikari-chan, Mika, Shinya. After earthquake, X. Sashiro no Yuyoi, before the earthquake, naught. Iria, Re. After earthquake, X. Chiga Akari, before the earthquake, triangle, Teriko. After earthquake, X. Before earthquake, naught. Ii-chan, Tomo, Maki, Shinya. After earthquake, X. Chiga Teriko, before the earthquake, triangle, Akari. After earthquake, X. Sakaki Shinya, before the earthquake, naught. Ii-chan, Tomo, Maki, Hikari. After earthquake, naught. Maki. Hando Re, before earthquake, naught. Iria, Yayoi. After earthquake, Iria. Before earthquake, naught. Iria, Yayoi. After earthquake, triangle, Iria. Himane Maki, before earthquake, naught. Ii-chan, Tomo, Hikari, Shinya. After earthquake, naught. Shinya. Akagami Iria, before earthquake, naught. Re, Yayoi. After earthquake, triangle, Re. Look about right? I understand the noughts and the X's, but what are those triangles? Akane-chan was right about family testimonies. Iria-chan, Re-chan, Akari-chan, Hikari-chan, and Teriko-chan seem like the pretty understanding bunch, so for now, they get a check. It's just like that. Well, their alibis seem kind of shaky. She scrolled down the screen and checked the alibi chart one more time. For now, let's ignore the possibility of an accomplice, I said. And that includes family ties. If we assume that much, we can remove Shinya-san and Maki-san from the suspect list. Oh, and also Rei-san and Iria-san. 4 people down, 7 left. If Shinya-san's testimony was correct, then the locked room with the paint becomes a problem. But if it was a lie, that means only Akane-san could have done it. I can't imagine why Shinya-chan would lie though. Well, it could have been a misunderstanding, or something rather than a lie. Well, how about that? I was starting to sound like Iria-san. But you know, Akane-san really is the prime suspect here, obviously speaking. Yeah, you can't help but think that, looking at this chart, no matter how fair or sympathetic you are, it doesn't change the fact that she's the only one without any smidgen of an alibi. If that weren't the case, she probably wouldn't have accepted this whole seclusion idea. Yeah, for sure. So Tomo, do you think Akane-san did it? I wouldn't say that. Like she said herself, there's no evidence. You can't decide who the criminal is by process of elimination alone. We haven't even examined Kanami-chan's body yet either. Ah, and I suppose there's still the fact that the room was locked. But if you take that into account, nobody could have done the crime. Ii-chan, you have any ideas about that? I've got a few, I said as I pondered. Maybe I'll figure something out after a little while. How about you, Tomo? I've got tons of ideas, she said. Just need to give a little more thought though, and it should all fall into place. Oh, and Ii-chan, whether or not Shinya-san's testimony is true, I think the murder happened after the earthquake. Huh? Why? The picture of you. Do you think she really could have finished a picture like that before the earthquake? I don't think so. Well, it was tough to say. Kanami-san was pretty damn fast when it came to painting. But if what Kunigisa said was true, then it was all the more certain that the door had been locked. That wouldn't be the most helpful development in the case. And then there's the headless body itself. I nodded. Regardless of who killed her, why would they cut her head off? They say to beware of swapped identities when bodies show up with no head. But I don't suppose there's any need to doubt in this particular case. There were 12 people, one had their head cut off, and now there's 11. We know exactly who and where those 11 people are. But if it was one of those 3 maid sisters who got killed, it would have been a real problem, Kunigisa said. But with Kanami-chan, there's probably no need to worry about it. If there were other people on the island, it would be different. But, we don't need to consider that notion either. If we assume that there are X number of other people on this island, all this narrowing down of suspects and alibi searching becomes pointless. I don't know what this detective coming in 6 days will have to say about it, but for now, let's just worry about the 11 people we know about. You said it, she said, gaping at the ceiling. Now, if you consider the possibility of an accomplice or some kind of remote trickery, only you and I could be taken off the suspect list. Why me too? I said. 'Cause I trust you, she answered coolly. Still, why did it have to be a beheading? Body switching is the only feasible reason I can think of, but I wonder, maybe that's not even how she died. Yeah, if it was, there wouldn't have been so little blood. It would have been more like a river of blood, but at a glance there didn't appear to be any stabbing wounds or anything. So maybe she was poisoned or strangled. I mean, just to speculate. I wonder if she went down easy. Probably her legs didn't work, and even though her eyesight had come back, it definitely wasn't perfect. Once you approached her, the act of killing her probably wouldn't be very difficult, and cutting off the head wouldn't be that much of a challenge either. As long as you didn't hesitate, it would only take a few minutes. There's no clear motive either. Why did Kanami-san have to be murdered? Nobody has to be murdered, but yeah, I wonder why. Aside from Shinya-chan, everyone here only just met Kanami-chan, right? But maybe it's not the case. Maybe someone actually had some connection with her before coming here. It wouldn't be so strange. I guess you could presume just about anything on that subject. In which case, there was no point presuming anything. Kunigisa let out a groan. Well, let's just worry about these other details first, and figure out who knows who later on. How are we going to do that? Who do you think you're talking to? She grinned at me. Of course, this blue-haired little girl had a background, so to speak. Now then, shall we do a crime scene investigation? She picked up her nearby digital camera. On the way to Kanami-san's room, we passed by Yayoi-san. I meant to greet her, but there was something unapproachable about her, and I missed my chance. She continued walking in the opposite direction. We had passed right by each other, but it was like she hadn't even noticed our existence. I wonder what she's up to, Kunigisa said. Something seems a little strange about her. She looked kind of worried about something, or maybe just deep in thought. Maybe she was looking around Kanami-chan's room, Maybe she had the same idea as us. Solve the case quick so that we can all go home. I wonder. She's been here the longest, right? I doubt she'd suddenly want to pack up and leave. Maybe, but personally I hate islands where murders take place. I really wonder about that. Just before we all scattered from the dining room, Irie-san had laid down a rule. Until Aikawa-san gets here in 6 days, nobody leaves the island. We're all suspects here, myself included. In other words, Akane-san wasn't the only one being imprisoned, and it wasn't just curiosity motivating Kunigisa to dig deeper. She wanted to go home as planned. As lazy as she was strangely anal about plans. Well, either way is good. I certainly wouldn't mind if Yayoi-chan solved the case for us. I don't think that's what she was up to. She had a sort of melancholy, somber vibe about her. I can't help but wonder if she was disposing of evidence or something. That would certainly suck a lot for us, Kunigisa said, eyeing me through the digital camera. Let's hurry up and check it out. Kanami-san's door had been left open. You could see the inside of the outward opening door. Nobody seemed to be around. I wondered what everyone else was doing except Akane-san, who was presumably in the storage room. But I decided to set that thought aside for the time being. People will do as they please, insofar as they're allowed. That was true on the island, and it was true anywhere else. The room smelled like paint thinner as usual, but the paint seems to be mostly dry by now. Kanami-san's body remained in the same place it had been this morning, and looked otherwise exactly the same. So let's check it out. There was something terribly comical about a headless body. What makes dead bodies so creepy and terrifying is the emotionless expression on their face. But with no head to display that face, the creepiness and terror is replaced with hilarity. It's like looking at a screwed up attempt at plastic model or something. The marble river. Kunigisa's tossed coat remained right in the middle. By the way, about that coat, how much was it? It was part of a 2-piece set for about 20,000, I think. Dollars? Nah, yen. Wow, an average price. I was a little surprised. Well, might as well go inside. I tried to take a step forward, but she tugged on my sleeve, just like she had this morning. What now? Try jumping. Huh? Come on, it's an experiment. Get a little running start here and see if you can jump the paint river. Your athletic skills aren't so bad, right? They're not so good either. Give it a shot. You got it. I revved myself up a bit and gave my best leap, but as expected, I couldn't clear the river. I landed on both feet only slightly past the centre point. That's all you're going to get. Kunigisa stepped across, using her coat as a stepping stone. If you can't even do it, Shinya-san's the only person here who might even have a chance. He's the only other guy after all. Yeah, but those maids seem pretty able-bodied, to be honest. I mean, they carried all your luggage, including those PCs and workstations. Those things aren't light. Yeah, but they're all petite, and it's just a matter of width. But then again, people always say ability matches necessity. I guess that detail is a little fuzzy. Now, let's see what's going on with Kanami-chan. She approached Kanami-san's body, camera in hand. She seemed to be particularly interested in examining the body. While I was more concerned with Kanami-san's canvases, there were several lying around, including the cherry blossom picture that she'd smashed up. I had to tremble at the sight of it. Even I, who had not so much as a passing interest in art or aesthetics, couldn't deny that I was looking at sheer, untainted beauty. And then there was the picture I had modelled for. Kanami-san had promised to give it to me, but I couldn't accept something like this. I didn't have nerves of steel after all. I'm probably just babbling here, but I want to pick up the painting. But then I stopped myself. It might have been bad to leave fingerprints behind. Then again, it might not have mattered. Hey Tomo. Yeah? Is there something weird about this painting? You mean that picture of you? What's weird? It's a normal painting. Certainly Kunigisa's tapes weren't the most ordinary thing in the world either, but that was beside the point. Something about this painting was off, in a maddeningly subtle way. It wasn't anything about the image itself, but just the strange feeling of absurdity it somehow conveyed. Well anyway, go ahead and snap a picture of it, will you? Something about it bothers me. Got it! I'm still not finding anything unusual over here. She appeared to be inspecting Kanami-san's body. Really? I said, walking over to her. Yep. I'm no professional though. The cause of death is still a mystery, and I can't narrow down the time of death either. Without a coroner, it's probably impossible. If only Irya-chan had invited a medical genius here too. You know, like Blackjack or something. Then again, even with a coroner, it would probably be pretty hard without the body's head. I guess we're not going to figure anything out here after all. Yep. She lifted the corpse up under her arm. Even she had no qualms about touching a dead body. Kinda takes me back, you know. It's just like the old days. Yeah, you're right, but it doesn't feel like that to me. It's like I'm seeing a dead body for the first time all over again. It's been bothering me for a while. There was a sort of unspeakable disconcerting feeling. Like when you find a scar on your own body you don't remember having. It's jamais vu. It's what? It's the opposite of déjà vu. It means that you feel like you're doing something for the first time, even though you've really done it many times before. Supposedly it happens when your senses have been numbed. Then my senses must have been numbed some time long ago. A lot of things had happened abroad, after all. Anyway, Kunigisa said, there aren't any stab wounds, so maybe she was strangled after all, and then to hide the bruises the killer cut off her head. Sounds crazy, but here's what I don't get. Whatever the killer used to cut the head off, knife, axe, hatchet, whatever it was, why didn't they just use that to kill her? Maybe they did. There are no stab wounds, but just on the body, maybe they stabbed her in the head. Yeah, maybe, I said. Speaking of that, where do you suppose the head went? I wonder where the killer took it. I mean, if the killer took it. Half of the island is a forest. Maybe they buried it somewhere out there, or they could have tossed it out of the sea. Disposal probably wasn't that much of a problem. Which brings us back to the question. Why did the killer cut her head off? But that question was a dead end. I've got more questions, Ichan. Take a look at this. The head was cut off from the very base of the neck, right? Why is it cut like that? Don't you think if you were to decapitate someone, the normal place would be to cut around the centre of the neck? The position to cut was indeed unnaturally low, but I wouldn't have thought of it as something significant. I crossed my arms and said nothing. This crime scene investigation didn't seem like it would yield any clues after all. At best, we had to confirm that the river of paint couldn't be jumped, but that seemed more like a step backward than progress. Kunigisa went over to the phone stand by the window and picked up the phone receiver. Nothing unusual here either. You thought there would be? I thought maybe the circuit had been rigged so that the calls from the phone would connect to a different phone, but there doesn't seem to be anything wrong on this end. Doesn't look like it's been tinkered with either. The phone, huh? Say, how'd it go again? What did Kanami-san say to Shinya-san? The paint spilled. I'm busy working, so don't bother me. Stuff like that. But Shinya-san should have gone and checked on her, even if she told him not to. It may seem strict, but it's his duty as a caretaker. You're right about that, but there's no use talking about what's already done. And anyway, Shinji-san already has to bear that burden himself. It wasn't particularly our place to lay the blame on him, and there was no need to do so. It's a crazy world, but it's also a world where you have to take responsibility for your own actions. And sometimes, we also have to take responsibility for our own lack of action. Is it possible that they restored the phone back to normal afterwards? Well, I wouldn't say it's totally impossible, but it practically is. It's not like plugging and unplugging a cord or something. Yeah, good point. I guess we'll have to look at other possibilities, like the locked door. You think I was lying? Suddenly I hear Shinji-san's voice from behind me, so I spun around. He stood at the door with some kind of orange bag in his hands. But I could hear Kanami's voice for sure. That's no lie. From the sound of his voice, he seemed pretty worn out, which probably goes without saying. I'm not saying you lied, Shinji-san. We don't have anything that certain. But is it possible that the voice you heard wasn't hers? No, he answered. I'd known Kanami for a long time. There's no way I would mistake her voice. Are you doubting me? It's not like that. There's no reason you would have killed her after all. I don't know. Maybe we weren't on the best of terms. He gave a weak smile. Then he stepped through the dried paint and approached us. Upon closer inspection, it became clear what the orange bag was. It was a sleeping bag. He looked up at me. We can't just leave her here, right? He said. I got permission from Irie-san and everything. I've decided to bury her on the mountain, out back. It's not like Irie-san's going to call the police, and this is all her property anyway. Burying Kanami is all I can do now. We'll help you, I said. He tried to think of an appropriate response, but realizing the benefit of having 2 extra people helping him, he said nothing. Together, we lifted up Kanami-san's body and silently put it inside the sleeping bag. I know it goes without saying, but her flesh was completely devoid of warmth. Shinji-san, do you have something to dig up with? There should be a big shovel back by the entrance. Kunigisa-chan, shall we have you carry it for us? Say, is that a digital camera? Yep, Kunigisa nodded. We have to keep record of the crime scene for when Mr. Detective shows up. I don't think the courts will demand publicity right, after all, right? That was probably the worst way she could have phrased it, but Shinji-san responded with a nod and a smirk. I see. Shall we go then? Shinji-san, about this painting. Kanami's painting. It's nice, isn't it? It's the last painting she ever did, but she was intending to give it to you, so please take it. Is it okay? I want to honour her last wishes. Her last wishes? Yes, she was dead. Nothing left to fulfill. Get her feet, will you? I'll carry the head. And he cut himself off, most likely realising that there was no head to carry. Without saying anything, I picked up the legs. He no doubt wished that he could bury the head with the body, but its whereabouts remained unknown. Either the killer was hiding somewhere, or it had already been tossed into the woods or thrown into the sea, like Kunigisa said. Holding on to the legs, it occurred to me how heavy the body was, heavier than you'd expect. Probably wasn't impossible for a single person to carry, but 2 people was definitely better. From that point on, none of us spoke. In silence, we lifted her body and left the mansion. In silence, we headed for the mountain in the back, and in silence, we dug the hole. The sleeping bag that held her body was such a cheap-looking orange excuse for a coffin. I couldn't help but find it comical. In that moment, I felt like human death is nothing but a big joke. People die. That was something I knew too well, to the point that it was stifling, to the point that I wanted to vomit. And Kunigisa knew it too. And Shinji-san, being a full-fledged adult, had no doubt been touched by death in the past as well. That's probably why we were all so quiet. Finally, Shinji-san spoke. You 2 can go back now, he said. I'm gonna stay here a little longer. I wanted to say something, but I didn't. Kunigisa pulled my hand, and we left without a word. Maybe Shinji-san was going to cry. Maybe not. Either way, we no longer had a reason to linger. After all, we were just bystanders. I wonder if it was okay to go ahead and bury her, Kunigisa said. I think so. Shinji-san seems to be the only thing that she had resembling a loved one, and that's what he wanted to do. And we couldn't just leave her lying in the odd lair all week. True, but... Say, Tomo, how big a crime do you suppose it is to abandon a corpse? You probably get less than a 3-year sentence, but you probably get off with parole too. But you and I are both underage anyway, so no worries. No matter what happens, we can get off with a little money. What a tasteless conversation. Not that I was looking for a tasteful one. I'm just babbling here. Kunagisa gave me a funny look.